Wait, stop. The words left her lips before she even realized she was speaking. The grand hall of the company's charity gala buzzed with clinking glasses, laughter, and polite conversations, but for Victoria Lane, CEO of Lane Enterprises, the world had just gone completely silent. Her eyes were locked on a man at the piano. He was a janitor. She knew. She'd seen him mopping the marble floors of her office countless times. But tonight, dressed in a simple black suit and standing behind the grand Steinway, he wasn't a janitor. He was a conduit of something she hadn't felt in years, a flood of memories she had carefully locked away. His fingers moved across the keys with a gentle precision, coaxing a melody out of the piano that made the air shimmer. And then, shockingly, recognition hit her like a bolt of lightning. The tune, it was the song. The song that her first love had written for her. Victoria's chest tightened. She had tried to forget that part of her past, the summer when she was young, carefree, and utterly in love with a boy named Daniel, whose fingers had danced across piano keys, leaving music trails that lingered in her heart long after he was gone. She hadn't thought of that song in over a decade. Not once. Yet here it was, alive, filling the room with notes that made her stomach twist with both longing and confusion. The janitor, this ordinary, humble man she barely noticed, continued to play, his eyes closed, lost in the music. She could see the faint tremor of emotion in his jaw, the way his shoulders lifted and fell with every phrase. He didn't look at her. He didn't even seem aware of her presence. And yet, it felt as if he were playing for her alone, reaching directly into the deepest recesses of her memory and pulling at the strings of her heart. Her assistant, standing beside her, nudged her. "Vic, you okay?" She shook her head, trying to compose herself, but the music had already wrapped around her. The song wasn't just familiar, it was intimate, personal. How could a janitor know this? Could he possibly? No, that was impossible. She had never shared that song with anyone. "Who is he?" she whispered, barely audible. Her assistant shrugged. "Just one of the staff, I think. He's always around late nights, cleaning the offices. He plays piano, too." Victoria couldn't answer. She was rooted to the spot, her mind racing through memories of long ago afternoons spent with a boy whose laughter was as bright as sunlight and whose touch had once made her feel like she could conquer the world. She hadn't just lost him. He had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only this melody as proof that their love had ever existed. And now, decades later, she was hearing it again. The last note lingered in the air like a question, unfinished, delicate. The janitor opened his eyes. For a brief moment, their gazes met. His eyes were warm, brown, and filled with a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. There was a recognition there, an understanding, but she didn't know from where. Her legs suddenly felt weak. She gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. People were chatting, glasses clinking, but none of it mattered anymore. The gala, the networking, the speeches, it was all background noise compared to this revelation. Victoria took a step forward, then stopped, unsure if she should approach. What if she was imagining it? What if it was some cruel trick of fate, some uncanny coincidence? But her gut screamed otherwise. She knew. She knew. The janitor's hands hovered above the keys as if waiting for permission to continue. He glanced at her again, and in that look, she saw something she hadn't expected. A story, a connection, a mystery that was just beginning. She had no idea who this man really was or how he knew the song. But she did know one thing. Her life had just changed, in a way she couldn't yet understand. The melody, simple yet haunting, had cut through her carefully constructed world and reminded her that love, real, undeniable love, never truly dies. Victoria felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She had built her empire on logic, on control, on careful calculations. But this was chaos. This was raw, unfiltered emotion crashing into her life like a storm. And somehow, amidst the shock and confusion, she knew she had to find out the truth. Before she could take another step, he finished the melody. The last note hung in the air, trembling like a heartbeat, and then silence fell. The room seemed to exhale with her. And in that silence, Victoria Lane realized, some stories don't stay in the past. Some melodies demand to be heard again. Victoria's heart was still racing, the echoes of the piano lingering in her mind like a whispered secret. She couldn't focus on the gala, couldn't pay attention to the polite conversations swirling around her. All she could see was him, the janitor, the man who had somehow resurrected a piece of her past she had buried deep. He was packing his sheet music now, his movements calm, unhurried, as if he had no idea the storm he'd just unleashed in her chest. Victoria swallowed hard, her instincts screaming at her to approach him, to demand answers. But pride, that lifelong armor she had built around herself, held her back. She couldn't let herself appear vulnerable, couldn't let anyone see how completely he had unsettled her. Yet, despite her hesitation, her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She weaved through the crowd, past people she barely noticed, drawn by something she didn't fully understand. By the time she reached him, he was gathering his bag, his expression serene, almost shy. He looked ordinary, yet his presence carried a gravity she couldn't ignore. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He looked up, and their eyes met again. This time, there was recognition, not just of her, but of something unspoken. His gaze held a depth that made her stomach flutter and her mind reel. You played that song," she said, her voice trembling. "Where did you learn it?" He hesitated, his hands tightening slightly around the strap of his bag. Then, with a soft exhale, he spoke. I knew someone who taught it to me a long time ago. Someone very special." Victoria's pulse quickened. The melody had been unique, a private composition, something no one outside her past could possibly know. Yet here it was, played perfectly, bringing with it a flood of memories she thought were gone forever. I don't understand," she admitted, trying to steady herself. "That song, it belonged to someone I knew. It's been years, no one else knows it." He looked at her and for a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging a silent truth. "I know. That's why I played it. I had to see if you remembered." Victoria's mind spun. The words were cryptic, yet strangely familiar. How could a janitor know about her first love? Why would he care whether she remembered a song from over a decade ago? Every rational thought screamed that she should step back, that this was impossible, that she was letting her imagination run wild. And yet, the certainty in his eyes told her otherwise. "Who are you?" she asked, unable to hide the mix of fear and curiosity in her voice. He smiled faintly, a little wistful, and finally spoke with a quiet confidence that made her lean in closer. "I'm someone who believes that some melodies don't belong to the past. Some melodies find their way back to the right person." Her chest tightened. His words sounded like poetry, like something lifted from a dream she had long ago. And in that moment, she realized she didn't just want to know who he was. She needed to. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why tonight?" He paused, then reached into his bag and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Victoria's eyes widened as he handed it to her. The handwriting was familiar, so familiar that her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. It was a note, just a few lines, but it carried a weight that made her stomach twist. Some songs wait for the right ears. Some hearts need reminders. D. Her breath caught. Daniel. It had to be. The signature, the words, the melody, they all pointed to one truth she hadn't dared imagine. This janitor might not be who he appeared to be. Victoria looked up, her mind racing. Could it really be him? Could Daniel, the boy who had once written her this song, really be standing here in front of her, disguised as a janitor, his eyes holding secrets she wasn't yet ready to hear? He seemed to sense her thoughts, his gaze softening. "I had to be sure it was you," he said simply. "I had to know if you still remembered." For the first time in years, Victoria felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: vulnerability. Her walls, her control, her carefully curated life, all of it felt fragile against the weight of the moment. And yet, beneath the shock and disbelief, there was a spark of hope, fragile but undeniable, that whispered, maybe, just maybe, this was her second chance. The gala continued around them, oblivious to the storm of emotions playing out at the piano, but Victoria didn't care. She was no longer the CEO in control of a sprawling empire. She was simply a woman standing in front of a man who had just reminded her of a love she thought she'd lost forever. And somewhere deep in her heart, a melody began to play, a new one, born of curiosity, fear, and the faintest hint of possibility. Victoria couldn't tear her eyes away from him. Every logical part of her mind screamed that she should step back, demand answers, protect herself from this sudden whirlwind of emotion. And yet, every fiber of her being was drawn to him, to the melody that had reopened a part of her heart she had thought lost forever. He was still standing by the piano, the soft glow of the chandelier catching the edges of his dark hair. He looked unremarkable in any other context, a janitor, a man who could easily blend into the background of her life. But tonight, he carried a gravity that made the room around them blur into insignificance. Each subtle movement, each glance, felt deliberate, as if he were trying to communicate a message she hadn't yet learned how to read. Why now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "After all these years?" He hesitated. The simple act of standing in front of her, holding her gaze, seemed to take effort. "Because some things can't wait," he said finally. "Some truths they demand to be faced. And some melodies, they don't just fade away, they follow the person they were meant for." Victoria's chest tightened. Every word he spoke seemed to carry a weight that threatened to pull her under. The gala, the corporate deals, the endless responsibilities of being CEO, they all felt like distant echoes compared to the intensity of this moment. She wanted answers, desperately, but she feared what she might learn. "Then tell me," she whispered. "Who are you really?" He glanced down at the piano keys, as if gathering his courage. "I am the man you once loved," he said softly. "But I am not the same boy you remember. Life, it changed me. Circumstances, choices, time, they forced me to step into a role I never imagined. I became the janitor." Victoria's eyes widened. A janitor? The words were incongruous with everything her mind knew about him, about the person she had loved so fiercely. But why? Why hide like this? Why come back in secrecy? His gaze met hers again, steady and unwavering. "Because I needed to know if the connection, the music, the bond we shared was still alive. I couldn't risk everything without certainty. And I couldn't risk startling you, losing you again before I even had a chance." Her mind reeled. A lifetime of longing, of unanswered questions, of suppressed memories, was pouring over her like a tidal wave. All at once, the world seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them and the lingering echoes of that melody. You waited all this time," she said, her voice trembling. "All these years you carried this with you?" He nodded. "Every day. I never forgot the song, never forgot you. And now, I had to see if fate still had a place for us." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, though she fought them back fiercely. She had always prided herself on control, on poise, on the ability to manage every situation with precision. And yet, here she was, exposed, vulnerable, faced with a man who had returned not with fanfare or announcements, but with a melody that stripped away every layer of armor she had built. The sound of footsteps approaching snapped her briefly back to reality. Gala guests continued to chatter, oblivious to the storm of emotions between them. Victoria realized the world was still moving, still demanding her attention. Yet, in that moment, nothing else mattered. She stepped closer, her hand hovering near the piano keys. "Then tell me everything," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. "Tell me why you left, why you returned like this, and why now?" He took a deep breath, his fingers brushing the polished wood of the piano. "I left because life forced me to. Circumstances tore us apart, circumstances I couldn't control. But I never stopped playing the song, never stopped hoping that one day, somehow, it would lead me back to you." Victoria's mind swirled. The pain of the past, the heartache of losing him, the uncertainty of what this meant now. It all collided into a dizzying storm. She wanted to ask more questions, but words failed her. Instead, she let herself simply stand there, letting the weight of his confession settle in her chest. For a moment, they were silent, the faint echo of the melody lingering in the space between them. Then he spoke again, softer this time, almost a whisper meant only for her. "Victoria, some things are worth risking everything for. You are worth it." Her breath caught. The words, the melody, the vulnerability in his eyes, they pierced through every carefully constructed barrier. She realized that life had presented her with an impossible choice: cling to control and certainty, or surrender to a past she thought she had lost forever, to a love that still burned bright beneath the ashes of time. Victoria's hand finally rested on the edge of the piano, her eyes never leaving his. "Then, maybe it's time we stopped hiding from the past," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. "Maybe it's time to see if that melody can guide us forward." The man smiled, a slow, gentle curve of his lips that made her heart ache with recognition. He extended his hand, not just to her, but toward the possibility of something new, something extraordinary. And in that moment, Victoria understood. The song had brought them back together, but it was their choice now whether to play the next chapter or let the music fade once more. The gala had long since turned into a blur of chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses, but Victoria felt as if time had stopped. Every nerve in her body was alive, alert, trembling with a mixture of anticipation, fear, and disbelief. The janitor, Daniel, though she still hardly dared to say it aloud, stood near the piano, his eyes quietly studying her, as if waiting for her next move. She swallowed hard, trying to steady the storm of emotion raging inside her. I need to understand," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "All these years, why did you disappear without a word? Why leave me with nothing?" Daniel's expression softened, but there was a shadow behind his gaze, a weight she could sense, but not yet fully grasp. "It wasn't simple," he said, his voice low, measured. "I had no choice. Some things in life, they pull you in directions you don't want to go. But not a day went by that I didn't think about you, that I didn't hope somehow our paths would cross again." Victoria's heart clenched. She had spent years convincing herself that closure didn't matter, that she had to move forward without looking back. And yet, every note he had played, every word he had spoken, had torn down the carefully built walls around her. The memories she had buried, the laughter, the piano sessions, the stolen promises, came rushing back like a flood she couldn't hold back. I never stopped hoping," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I never forgot you either. But you just vanished. How could you let me go like that?" Daniel shifted slightly, taking a small step closer, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the polished air of the gala hall. "I never wanted to leave," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Circumstances, they forced my hand. But every day I carried you with me, in every song I played, in every note I touched. I thought maybe one day the melody would bring me back to you." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, the first real crack in her composed, controlled exterior. She wanted to lash out, to demand more than vague words and cryptic explanations. And yet, there was something undeniable about the way he spoke, something that bypassed all rational thought and reached straight into the part of her heart that had always known this moment would come. "Then why here? Why like this?" "At my gala," she asked, her voice catching. Daniel's gaze softened, his hand brushing over the piano keys as if drawing courage from them. "Because I had to be sure. I had to see you, hear the melody come alive, and see if you remembered. If the connection we had was still there." Victoria swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat grow heavier. "And now?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Now," he said, finally letting himself step closer, "I see that it never went away. The melody, it's still alive. So are we, in a way. And now it's a choice, whether we let it grow, or let it fade again." The vulnerability in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice. It was almost too much to bear. Victoria had built her life on certainty, on control, on logic. And yet, here was a man who had returned not with grand declarations or corporate power, but with music, with memory, with proof that some connections are stronger than time. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps startled them. Several gala guests were moving through the room, oblivious to the quiet storm between Victoria and Daniel. One of her colleagues, a woman she respected deeply, paused near the piano, smiling politely. "Beautiful music," she said. "I didn't know we had talent among the staff." Victoria's cheeks flushed. She realized how exposed she felt, not just emotionally but socially. Here she was, CEO of a major company, standing in a gala hall, and yet she felt powerless in the presence of the man before her. Daniel noticed her hesitation and gave her a reassuring glance. "Don't worry about them," he whispered. "This is just between us." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The gala continued, the music and chatter forming a distant backdrop. And in that space, she finally allowed herself to ask the question that had been buried beneath years of pride and fear. What happens now? Daniel reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "Now, we see if this second chance is real. We see if the melody we shared can guide us forward. We face the past together." Victoria felt a strange mix of fear and hope twist inside her. Life had handed her countless challenges, but nothing had prepared her for this. Facing a love she thought was gone, confronting a past she had tried to lock away, standing at the crossroads of memory and possibility. She nodded slowly, letting her fingers intertwine with his. "Then, let's not waste another moment." And as the gala continued around them, Victoria realized that some songs, some loves, don't just linger. They demand to be lived, to be felt, to be embraced fully, no matter how long the years have been. Tonight, the past and the present collided, and for the first time in years, she felt the possibility of a future she had thought she'd lost forever. Victoria felt her breath catch as Daniel led her back to the piano. The gala was still humming in the background, but all of that, the chatter, the laughter, the clinking glasses, faded into insignificance. There was only him, the keys, and the melody that had once bound their hearts together. "I want you to hear it one last time," he said softly, his fingers hovering above the keys. "But this time, it's not just for memory. It's for the future." Victoria's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times, what it would feel like to confront a love lost, to finally see the man she had adored all those years ago. Yet nothing in her memory had prepared her for the intensity of this present, for the way her heart still recognized every subtle nuance of his touch, every delicate pause, every gentle phrase of the song. As he began to play, the room seemed to dissolve around her. The notes floated like a bridge between the past and the present, a tangible reminder of everything they had shared, everything they had lost, and everything they could now reclaim. She could feel the music coursing through her, stirring memories, hopes, and dreams she had long suppressed. Daniel glanced at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "Do you remember now?" he asked, his voice quiet but unwavering. Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. Every note, every word, every feeling. She took a step closer, letting the music wash over her, letting it break down the final barriers she had built around her heart. "I remember us, all of it." For a moment, they simply stood there, bound by the melody and the history it carried. Then Daniel's hands moved with renewed confidence, weaving the song into a new arrangement, a continuation that spoke of hope, second chances, and futures yet unwritten. It wasn't just the old song anymore, it was theirs, reborn in the present, echoing with possibility. Victoria felt a rush of emotion, the years of longing, fear, and uncertainty converging in a single, breathtaking moment. She realized that the melody hadn't just been a memory, it had been a map, guiding them back to each other, showing them that love, no matter how long it waits, never truly disappears. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why did you wait so long?" Because I needed to be sure, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. Sure that you were still you, that we could still be us, and that this time we wouldn't let anything tear us apart. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining as the music swelled around them. The weight of years apart, the unspoken questions, the fears of what had been lost, all of it melted away under the magic of the melody. You've changed everything, she admitted, her voice barely audible above the piano. Not just the song, but me too. You reminded me that I can feel again, that I can love again. Daniel smiled, a warmth and tenderness in his eyes that made her chest ache. You never stopped loving, he said simply. You just didn't know it yet. And now we have a chance to write the rest of our story. Together. Victoria felt tears stream down her cheeks, unrestrained, as if the music itself had unlocked a floodgate of emotion. She stepped closer, her heart pounding, her soul fully alive in a way it hadn't been for years. She realized that this was what she had been waiting for all along, not just the memory of love, but its return, more vivid and undeniable than ever before. Then let's not waste another moment, she said, her voice trembling with determination. No more hiding, no more waiting. Let's live the melody we've always deserved. Daniel's hands lifted her gently to the bench beside him, and together they played, letting the old song evolve into something new, a testament to resilience, second chances, and the enduring power of love. Each note resonated with laughter and tears, mistakes and forgiveness, endings and beginnings, all intertwined into a harmony that belonged entirely to them. As the final chord lingered in the air, Victoria leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. The gala continued around them, oblivious, but they didn't care. They had reclaimed more than a song tonight. They had reclaimed each other. For the first time in years, Victoria felt whole. The pain of the past had not been erased, but it had been transformed, woven into a melody that reminded her of who she was, who he was, and what they could be together. The janitor, the man who had returned her first love in the form of a song, was no longer just a figure from her past. He was her present, her future, and the melody of her heart come alive. As they sat together, hands entwined over the keys, Victoria whispered, "This is our song forever." Daniel nodded, smiling softly. "Forever," he agreed. And with that, the piano sang again, carrying the promise of a love that had waited, patiently and persistently, for the moment it could finally bloom anew.